And it's great to see like England women professional, the French are like semi-professional, but actually for the women's game to get really good, like we see in the men's, we've got to see professionalism across the board, and more support, investment, sponsorship, you name it.
Yeah, especially the global calendar. I think that's going to play a big part. And I love the fact that we finally had a standalone Six Nations for the women. It was just, so long may that continue, and long may we see other tournaments start to develop where it is at a separate time and it's not at a competing time to a men's game. And anyway.
Yeah, so, Christina, can I jump on that? Maggie, I saw you made comments about a women's British and Irish Lions team a few weeks back. Like, how cool is that? Like, when do you think that'll take shape?
Well, at the moment,
within a couple of years? Is it 5 years down the line? What are we talking?
Do you know what? There's no time frame on it at the moment. So Royal London are going to be doing a feasibility study to see if it will be feasible to actually do it, and to see whether, do we follow a similar format to what obviously the men have. Because at the moment, obviously, you guys play South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. In the women's game, South Africa and Australia aren't necessarily as strong as a New Zealand side. So would we potentially play against maybe a USA side, a Canada side, a French side? I don't know. So there's a discussion around that. And also, is it every 4 years, or is it something different? So I think it can definitely happen. We've got a Barbarians women's side, which at one stage no one thought that would happen, and it has happened. So in anything, never say never. I think it will. It's just when. I think, obviously we'll miss the window coming up, but I'd love to see it in the next few years. And I'd love it to happen maybe a New Zealand tour. So New Zealand, but you guys have already done New Zealand, so it's going to be a long time to wait, really. But I don't know. I'd love to imagine having that for a woman or a girl, to have that aspiration to think, I could one day wear the red jersey, not the Welsh one, the red one with, the Lions. That's such a... It'd be cool to have for a young girl to have that same aspiration. Yeah, totally. Well, Maggie, so fingers crossed.
Just on that, so say if you had to select a starting 15 match for the Lions this summer for women, who would you pick? And also now, here's another one for you. Can the likes of Ireland and Scotland and say Wales compete for a place in that squad with the teams who are training the 5-6 days a week in a professional capacity?
You think, I think, yes, I do think other nations could compete for a spot on that Lions team, especially from what we've seen from the Six Nations. There has been some good players from all those nations who have stood out. I do think if this Lions does happen, there'll be great investment, you'd like to think, for all the unions to ensure that they can support this, because it wouldn't be great to have a Lions tour, Lions team, and it for not to be successful. So I imagine there'll be greater investment in that. Who would make my starter 15? I'll be honest, I couldn't reel off everyone's name right now, but I'll think of a few off the top of my head. So Emily Scarrett, because you can't ignore her. She's good at everything, and it's one of those players who you hate, you're just good at everything. She's one of them. So she'd be starting in my team, and she'd probably be captain as well. I would have the likes of, actually from Wales, I'd have like a Jasmine Joyce. So she's a really good sevens player, absolute gas, and someone who would quite easily work with many different players, because she especially plays in the sevens world and on the GB side. I would have from, I'm just trying to think other nations. So I'd say from like Scotland, I'd have Emma Wassell. She's a good second row, dominant in that area, is a good leader as well. And then from England, I'll pull out another one, Poppy Cleal, really real key player. And then maybe a Marley Packer, who's a number 7, aggressive, got a real dogged edge to her. So there's a few players. There's probably many more, but right now I think off the top of my head, I'd probably say them. And I'd like to think that I would be like the team manager. I
was going to say, Alphonsi team manager.
Yeah, just running out of a bottle every now and again, and just with my flip-flops. So yeah, who knows?
Oh, it would be really exciting to see something like that. I suppose the story behind your rise to the top of the sport is fascinating, because you had to overcome both physical and structural hurdles. So can you give us a bit of an insight into the hardest battles that you faced on your way to the top?
Yeah, so I guess my first battle was when I was born. So when I was born with a physical disability called clubfoot. So it's where one or both your feet are turned in. So my right foot was turned in. And when I was born, I had an operation to straighten my foot. But it was quite a challenging time, because I had to kind of go in that hospital quite a lot when I was young to get my foot really corrected. So even when I run now, you could see I've got a bit of a limp, and when I walk, I've got a bit of a limp. And actually, if I'm in London, it looks quite cool that I've got a limp. If I'm everywhere else, people are like, "Why have you got a limp?" So I've got a bit of a, my foot wasn't great when I was born, and obviously got corrected. So that's kind of like my first battle. And then my second battle was probably at school. So at school, I was a difficult child, didn't really necessarily engage with the content at school. And actually what changed my life was a Welsh PE teacher. So I went to a really rough school, I'd say, in North London, and rugby was not existent. You don't talk about rugby. It was basically football. You either supported Arsenal or Tottenham, and that was it, really. But I remember, because my behaviour was quite bad, I used to get put on these school reports where you could almost get excluded from school. And one day my life changed because of my PE teacher. She, her name was called Lisa Burgess. She's actually on the Welsh Rugby Union. She's in the Hall of Famer, and she is on their board, I think now, first female to be on the board. And she came into school with black eyes and bruises, and I was like, "Miss, what do you do?" And she's like, "I play a sport called rugby union." And I was like, "Wow, what is a sport? What is this sport? I've never heard of it." And she was like, "Do you know what, Maggie? You should go to your local rugby club and just try it out and give it a go." And my local rugby club was Saracens. So I went down to Saracens, and they had a women's section and a young girl section. I just fell in love with the sport, It was the only sport I can do it. I could be aggressive and be really physical and not get in trouble for it. So I was like, I'm going to really excel here. And then, that was sort of my biggest battle, sort of like overcoming, first the adversity, and then sort of like, I guess, physical challenges with my attitude as well at school. And that sort of, those were the sort of my main big barriers. And I guess then being a female in a sport that's really male dominated, that was another barrier. And I've always said, and I still say it to this day, like, for me, rugby is genderless and it's colourless. It's a sport, and I absolutely love the sport. And for me, there may have been barriers, but I just did my very best to not acknowledge them. And regardless of my skin colour or regardless of my gender, was going to make it. And what's great now is that I was very fortunate to make it, and now there's many more out there. There's loads of people playing the sport, and it's one of the sports which I truly believe is a sport for all. Love it, so those are probably my sort of like hurdles along my career.
That's amazing. And now you touched off Saracens there, and I do have a question about the time that you put Owen Farrell in his place at the training grounds. So can you please tell me how that came about?
Yeah, so he might say something different, but so basically as part of the England setup, the England women's setup, a few of us got the opportunity to train at the boys' academy. So I was at Saracens, and I got the chance to train over a period of time at the Saracens men's or boys' academy, or whatever. I don't know what the terminology is at the moment right now. But and in the academy was the likes of Owen Farrell, Jamie George, George Cruz. So it's basically all the players who obviously gone to play for England were there at the time. So. And at the time, Owen Farrell, had this sort of like Justin Bieber quiff. And I remember this one session in particular that I attended, and Eddie Jones was the director of rugby at the time. And every now and again, he would come and do a session with the academy boys. And this one random session, he came and did this, he took the session. And they asked, like, is it okay for Maggie to still be, because I was the only woman at the time, or female at the time, who was at the session. And so is it okay for Maggie to join? They're like, yeah. He was like, it's fine, as long as she does everything they do. So tackle, whatever it is, she's got to do it. If she doesn't want to do it, she can go. I was like, absolutely fine, I'm ready to do this. And it was a full-on session as well. And I remember it was, I think we were doing like just a normal sort of, it was like a game scenario, maybe like 5v3. And all he had to do was pass the ball. So it was just like passing down the line. But I definitely targeted him, worked for me, and I was like, right, I can't not tackle him. It's going to be bad for my reputation. So I made a hit on him. I mean, some people might have exaggerated and said it's gone. I took him right back and dunked him and all that. But I made.
I believe it.
I believe in this story.
I drove his head into the ground.
Yeah,
absolutely melted it.